June 19, 1944, Philippine Sea, 15 miles west of Guam. Lieutenant Commander Alex Vraciu couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him from below the clouds. His Grumman F6F Hellcat, powered by the massive Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine, hummed with a deep, reassuring growl at 12,000 feet. The cockpit smelled of hot metal and aviation fuel. Through his canopy, the Pacific stretched endlessly in every direction, beautiful, indifferent, deadly. It was 10:07 in the morning when the radio crackled to life with words that would haunt him for decades. "Bandits inbound. Many bandits. They're everywhere." What happened in the next 6 minutes would break every record Vraciu had ever known, but it would also shatter something inside him that no metal could repair. Because war, he would later write in his logbook, doesn't care about your victories. It only counts what you lose. The Battle of the Philippine Sea, what pilots would darkly nickname the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, was already underway. Japanese carriers had launched everything they had, wave after wave of aircraft, desperately trying to stop the American advance. Among them were dozens of Mitsubishi A6 M50s, the legendary fighters that had once ruled these skies with terrifying dominance. Powered by the Nakajima Sakae 21 radial engine, the Zero could turn on a dime, climb like a rocket, and had torn through Allied squadrons in the early years of the war with ruthless efficiency. American pilots had feared them, respected them, died to them. But that was 1942. This was 1944, and everything had changed. Vraciu spotted them first. A formation of 6 Zeros descending through a break in the clouds, their wings glinting in the tropical sun like falling knives. His heart hammered against his ribs. Even now, even with all his training and the superiority of his aircraft, that first glimpse of a Zero triggered something primal. These weren't just planes. They were symbols of everything America had lost at Pearl Harbor, at Wake Island, in the Philippines. They represented 3 years of blood and burning carriers and friends who never came home. He pushed the throttle forward. The R2800's 18 cylinders roared to life, delivering over 2,000 horsepower. The Hellcat surged ahead with brutal acceleration that would have been impossible in the lighter, less powerful Zero. This was the difference now. Raw American engineering versus Japanese agility, speed and firepower versus grace and maneuverability. The old rules of engagement had been rewritten with better armor, self-sealing fuel tanks, and 6.5 caliber M2 Browning machine guns that could shred an enemy aircraft in seconds. Vraciu rolled into position behind the first Zero. The Japanese pilot, likely a young conscript with minimal training, Japan's experienced veterans were mostly dead by now, never saw him coming. Vraciu's finger found the trigger. The Brownings erupted with a deafening stutter that shook the entire airframe. Tracers arced across the sky like deadly fireflies. The Zero's wing exploded in a shower of aluminum fragments and caught fire instantly. The aircraft tumbled sideways, trailing black smoke, and fell toward the ocean 2 miles below. 1 down. 5 to go. What followed was less a dogfight than an execution. Vraciu moved through the formation with methodical precision, using the Hellcat's superior speed to control every engagement. Climb, dive, fire. Climb, dive, fire. The Zeros tried to turn with him, their only advantage, but Vraciu had learned the hard way never to turn with a Zero. Instead, he used vertical maneuvers, energy fighting, boom and zoom tactics that the Japanese pilots couldn't counter. Each Zero that fell felt like justice for every American pilot who had died in the early days when the odds were reversed. In 6 minutes, Vraciu shot down 6 Japanese aircraft, 6 pilots, 6 men with families, with dreams, with photographs tucked in their flight suits. When the last Zero spiraled into the sea, trailing a plume of black smoke that stained the perfect blue sky, Vraciu felt something crack inside his chest. Not fear, not even guilt exactly, just the terrible realization that he had become very, very good at killing. He radioed his carrier, the USS Lexington. Splash 6 Zeeks, returning to base. His voice was steady, professional. Inside, he was shaking. But as Vraciu turned his Hellcat towards home, his fuel gauge caught his eye. The needle was dropping faster than it should, much faster. He tapped the glass, hoping it was a malfunction. It wasn't. Somewhere during the engagement, perhaps from debris or a stray bullet he hadn't even noticed, his fuel tank had been compromised. The self-sealing mechanism had failed. He checked his instruments again. Distance to the Lexington, 42 miles. Fuel remaining, maybe enough for 30. The mathematics of survival suddenly became brutally simple. The same ocean that had swallowed 6 Japanese pilots was now waiting for him too. Vraciu's hands tightened on the control stick. The Hellcat that had made him invincible was now his coffin, and the Pacific stretched below him like an endless grave. His radio crackled with distant voices, other pilots reporting kills, celebrating victories, calling out targets. But Vraciu was alone now, watching his fuel gauge fall, calculating angles and distances and the odds of rescue in shark-infested waters. And then, through the haze on the horizon, he saw something that made his blood turn cold. A shape in the water, too large to be debris, moving, coming toward him. June 19, 1944. Philippine Sea, 38 miles west of the USS Lexington, 10:23 a.m. Lieutenant Commander Alex Vraciu's altitude was dropping, 2,000 feet. The Pratt & Whitney R-2800 was still running strong, but the fuel gauge now read nearly empty. He had maybe 4 minutes of flight time left, maybe less. His mind raced through emergency procedures, water landing checklist, flotation gear, signal flares, but none of it mattered if he couldn't stay conscious long enough to deploy his life raft. The Pacific was 79 degrees today, warm enough to survive for hours, cold enough to kill you eventually through exhaustion and hypothermia. And then there were the sharks. But that shape in the water below, it was still there, still moving. Vraciu squinted through the glare. Not a Japanese ship, the silhouette was wrong. Not a whale, the wake pattern was too deliberate. And then with a surge of hope so intense it made him dizzy, he understood. It was an American submarine, running on the surface, heading in his direction. He grabbed his radio. Any U.S. sub in grid Charlie 7, this is Navy 39 declaring emergency. Fuel critical, I'm going in the water. Repeat, going in the water. Request immediate assistance. Static answered him. The submarine was too far away, or its radio was off, or maybe Vraciu's transmitter was failing too. Everything was failing. That was the nature of war. Machines broke down, luck ran out, and the universe didn't care how many victories you'd just earned. 1,000 feet. The ocean was close enough now that he could see individual whitecaps. The Hellcat was still flying perfectly, still powerful, still the apex predator of the Pacific sky. But without fuel, it was just 12,000 pounds of metal and ammunition waiting to become a tomb. Vraciu thought about his wife Martha, about the letter he'd written last night that she'd receive if he didn't come home. He'd told her about the sunrise over the carrier deck, about the coffee that tasted like burnt oil, about missing her smile. He hadn't told her about the killing. Nobody told them about that part. The engine coughed, once, twice. The propeller windmilled for a moment, then caught again. That was it. 30 seconds left, maybe less. Vraciu aimed for the water near the submarine, hoping they'd spot a splash, hoping they'd be friendly, hoping for a miracle because that was all he had left. He took a deep breath, tightened his harness, and prepared for impact. The manual said to ditch parallel to the swells, nose up, tail down, let the fuselage absorb the shock. The manual also said survival rate for water landings was 60%. Vraciu had always been good at math. 60% meant 40% died. The engine quit. The sudden silence was deafening. The massive propellers stopped spinning, frozen against the sky like a cross. Vraciu pushed the nose down slightly, maintaining airspeed, gliding now, a 12,000-pound glider with the aerodynamics of a brick. 500 feet. 300 feet. The submarine was turning toward him. Someone on deck was pointing. They'd seen him. 100 feet. Vraciu pulled back on the stick, flaring the Hellcat, bleeding off speed. The ocean rushed up to meet him. 50 feet, 25. He braced for impact. This was it. This was how it ended. Not in a blaze of glory, not in a dogfight with a zero, but in a mechanical failure, a slow leak, a single bullet hole in the wrong place. War was like that, random, cruel, indifferent to heroism. The Hellcat hit the water hard. The impact slammed Vraciu forward against his harness with enough force to crack ribs. Water exploded over the canopy. The aircraft bounced once, twice, then settled into the swells. The nose immediately began to sink. Vraciu had maybe 20 seconds before the cockpit went under. He yanked the canopy release. Nothing. The mechanism was jammed. Seawater was pouring in through gaps in the fuselage, rising around his boots, his knees, his waist. The Hellcat was sinking fast, dragging him down into the dark. Panic clawed at his throat. He hammered at the canopy with his fists, but the plexiglass held. The water was at his chest, now his shoulders. He took one last deep breath as the Pacific closed over his head. The cockpit went dark. This was it. After everything, after shooting down 6 zeros, after surviving 3 years of war, after becoming an ace, he was going to drown in his own aircraft. And then through the murk, he saw something. A hand. Reaching through the water, pulling at the canopy from the outside. The jammed mechanism suddenly gave way. The canopy slid back. Strong hands grabbed Vraciu's flight suit and dragged him out of the sinking Hellcat. He kicked toward the light, toward the surface, his lungs screaming for air. He broke through into sunlight and gasped, coughing seawater. Alive! The submarine was right there, impossibly close, sailors already lowering ropes. But what Vraciu saw next made him forget everything else. The man who had saved him, the sailor who had dove into the ocean and yanked open his jammed canopy, was treading water beside him, grinning despite the danger. And on his shoulder, visible even through the wet fabric of his uniform, was a patch Vraciu recognized immediately. It was the insignia of Torpedo Squadron 8, VT-8, the unit that had been annihilated at the Battle of Midway in June 1942. All 15 aircraft shot down, 29 men killed, only 1 survivor. Vraciu had read the reports. Everyone had. It was one of the most devastating losses in naval aviation history. "Your VT-8?" Vraciu gasped, saltwater burning his throat. The sailor nodded, still grinning. Now I'm a submariner. Better odds." He helped Vraciu grab the rope. "Come on, Commander, let's get you aboard before your Hellcat takes you down with it." As they climbed onto the submarine's deck, Vraciu looked back. His F6F3 was gone, swallowed by the Pacific, just another piece of metal feeding the ocean floor. Somewhere below, 6 Japanese pilots had met the same fate. The cycle continued. The war ground on. But here on this submarine in the middle of nowhere, 2 survivors from different battles, different years, different kinds of hell, were alive. The captain appeared on the conning tower. "Welcome aboard the USS Harder, Commander. Hell of an entrance." He gestured toward the horizon where American carriers were launching more aircraft, where the battle still raged, where more young men were learning to kill or learning to die. "We'll have you back to your ship in a few hours. Think you can stay out of the water that long?" Vraciu looked down at his shaking hands. 6 victories, 1 ditching, 0 deaths. At least not his own. The mathematics and survival had worked out after all. But as the submarine dove beneath the surface and the sounds of battle faded above them, Vraciu understood something that would stay with him forever. The Hellcat had turned the tide. American engineering and firepower had finally overcome the Zero's early dominance. But the cost of that victory, measured in Japanese pilots who never had a chance, in fuel leaks and jammed canopies, in the random luck that separated survivors from statistics, that cost would echo long after the medals were pinned and the victory parades ended. The sailor from VT-8 handed him a blanket and a cup of coffee. "You'll be okay, sir. We all make it home eventually, one way or another." Vraciu nodded, but he wasn't sure he believed it anymore. Because some part of him, the part that had watched 6 zeros fall, the part that had accepted his own death in that sinking cockpit, that part would stay in the Pacific forever, circling in the sky above battles that never ended, waiting for fuel that would never come.